Okay, so I'm taking on a really big job today. I'm going to talk to you guys about myths. I'm going to talk to you guys about traditions. But most of all, I want to set up the story of the Odyssey by telling you a little bit about the Iliad. Okay, we already talked about Homer a little bit. And she or he was one of the greatest stories. And we know that Homer starts beginning to tell the story of the Odyssey. And we think that this was told orally, like it was a song. We talked about it being in dactylic hexameter. We talked about it probably rhyming and having a musical tone. And it's also probably told in several nights' time. So we have a similar tradition where we would watch a Netflix series, and you can't watch it just all in one night. You'd watch it several nights. And when would they do this type of thing? They would do this thing around a campfire, we think. Okay, scholars think. They don't really know. And it wasn't actually written down until like 700 BCE. It could have even been written down like 1200 BCE. We're not really sure. Or maybe it happened during that time period. Okay, so first of all, Homer is telling the story. But she cannot tell the story without divine assistance. So does that make her an epic hero? I'm not sure. But I do know I can relate to this and you can relate to this too. Okay, let me tell you why. What is a muse? First of all, it's a daughter of Zeus. They are very creative souls, and these goddesses or whatever, these figures are needed to help with divine inspiration. So let's just say that you're a sports star, or like you love to lift weights, or you're a roller skater, or you're a crafter, okay, or you're an artist. You like to draw. I'm trying to think of all these specific students in my mind that I'm trying to talk to because you're not here, so I don't know. But okay, when you play a basketball game, I imagine as a basketball player, you have to eat the right food, right? My husband was a speed skater. He had this whole regimen. Like he had to ride our bicycle upstairs, like I don't know what kind of bike it is, but he would ride that in the morning to kind of like loosen up, right? He would eat his power bars. He would drink his buoyancy boost or whatever it is, some sort of powder that he puts in with amino acids and everything. He has to have the right socks on, right? He has to have the skin suit. He has all this, okay? And he would always I remember he would always race the first race, and it was so bad. And he told me he had to do this because his emotions were he's not an emotional person, but inside he must have just been like very anxious. And I don't know if that's how you feel on the basketball court too. He would always just tell me like the first race was just ugly. He would just get the ugliness out of his system, and then he was ready to attack. I think the same thing probably happens with other people too. So a crafter, they can have all their things. They can have all their artwork here, but and they have all the perfect pencils, and they got their, I don't know, art hat on. I really don't know that much about art, but I'm trying. But and they might have, looked at a bunch of other pictures and got inspiration, went into nature, and but still they need divinity to help them with their vision. Okay. So let's take my favorite, Kanye West. Okay. Kanye West would not have been able to come out with all these albums and a fashion line and his own like church and everything without being inspired. And I want to submit to you that the Greeks even believed that this was divine. Like you cannot just be like, okay, inspire me. No, it doesn't happen like that. Inspiration comes to you in a dream. And that happens in the Bible a lot of times, but it also happens in Greek mythology where people are, brought a dream and they are inspired, or they are told some secret or stratagem to help them. Similarly, a basketball player cannot perform well unless it is like it comes from someplace other than right here and the things that they can control. There's an element of fate to it, is all I want to tell you. Okay, so when Homer goes to tell the story of the Iliad and the Odyssey, she has to call on the muses to help her. So she says, "Sing in me, muse, and through me help me tell the tale." Sing in me, muse, and through me tell the story of that man, skilled in all ways of contending, the warrior, harried for years on end, after he plundered the stronghold on the proud height of Troy. He's been everywhere. He's weathered everything. He's got this major determination. However, some really bad things happen to him. Okay. We can't get to the Odyssey until we look at the Iliad. All right. Now let me backtrack. This is my infographic that I made on the Iliad. So the Iliad starts with the Greeks being in their city-states, right? And they're all, Homer has to call on the muses to help her tell a story. And here she's going to tell a story of Odysseus and Achilles and the other Greeks like King Menelaus and Agamemnon, and how Troy was destroyed. Okay, she's going to tell you the story through song. It's going to be magnificent. It's going to take several nights. However, she's going to also need the help of the gods to get the story right. So hopefully so far, you're understanding that inspiration is something that is fleeting. Like currently, I don't know if Kanye West is making new albums, guys. I'm trying to use examples that you know of. I haven't heard any new songs by Lil Wayne. I know he's been in trouble lately. Divine inspiration has to also come from usually like a very happy place, or maybe you've gone through a lot of struggles and you come out the other end with this immense joy. And that's where inspiration is coming from. So Homer, she needs someone to help her tell the story, and she's going to ask the gods. Now, what is the story about? Like I said, this is about Achilles, Menelaus, Agamemnon, all these great Greek figures. Now, why and when does this whole myth start? It starts with this woman named Helen. I guess she's gorgeous. So picture Beyonce or picture Marilyn Monroe or whoever you want. Everybody is lined up to marry Helen. And to the Greeks, beauty is a very dangerous thing. It is sought after, but there's always trouble that comes with it, unfortunately. Like, do you want to win the beauty contest? Because think of all the danger like lurks, if you do. It's just not good. So you should know that many suitors, men, are interested in marrying this Helen. And so many that I think her stepdad is a little concerned. He says, I have to actually get all of you suitors to make a pact that none of you will kill each other or you won't kill me too if I decide on one of you. So they all agreed. So Achilles, Odysseus, Menelaus, Agamemnon, they all agree that they will protect whoever ends up being selected to be Helen's husband. And I guess the king of Sparta. They agree, even if she's kidnapped, they will help bring her back. Ugh, there's another thing that the Greeks fear. An oath. Yes, you should take an honorable oath. But should you? You should keep your promises. But be careful what promises you make. So all of them, of course, agree to this because they all really want to marry Helen. The thirst is real, okay? And they end up choosing, Helen's stepdad ends up choosing Menelaus, or Menelaus, however you want to pronounce it. Now, he's an older gent, but he's still tough and strong. This is Sean Connery here. Sean Connery just recently died, though, so I need a new picture. Tell me in this Ed puzzle, who is an older gentleman? George Clooney. Or pick somebody. Don't pick George Clooney. Pick someone. Tell me an older gentleman, still strong, still good looking, but maybe 20 to 30 years older. Tell me now. Okay. So Menelaus he's a Spartan king. He ends up getting picked. He has a brother named Agamemnon. He's also really powerful. He ends up marrying Helen. She's actually Helen of Sparta, but this is how it is decided. And also, you should know that he's older than the other suitors, but you don't want to mess with him. You also don't want to mess with Spartans because they send their little boys away at 5 or 7 years old to go get trained until they're 30 years old. Then at 30 years old, they come back to their village, their original village where their mothers live. First of all, as a mother, I couldn't send my 7-year-old away to be trained. Oh my gosh. The weak ones, they would throw away. They would get rid of them. But the powerful ones would come back. And it would be very odd for them to have experiences with women again. So the women would usually shave their heads on their wedding nights. So interesting facts there about the Spartans, but they were obsessed with combat, and their society kind of glorified that. So you don't want to mess with this guy. So about 2 years into their marriage, this happened. Okay, so this next thing that happens is on Mount Olympus. Mount Olympus is where the gods live. It's up here. Apparently there's a wedding between Achilles' mother and some other guy. And they decide they don't want to invite the goddess of chaos. Her name is, the goddess, her name is Discord. Discord means chaos. They don't want to invite her. Why don't they want to invite her? Because they don't want chaos at their wedding. But even if they didn't invite her, I would imagine she would cause some kooky shenanigans, some tomfoolery, as the kids say. She's so jealous and angry, though, that she wasn't invited. She throws an apple into the hall, and she labels it for the fairest. And, of course, the Greeks, obsessed with beauty and perfection and strength, all these goddesses at the wedding, they want to fight over it. The goddesses are Hera, Aphrodite, and Athena, and here they are pictured here. So Athena is the goddess of wisdom and war. Hera is Zeus's sister wife. Yes, she's his sister and his wife. They're always fighting. It's so funny almost. She's so jealous and stuff. But the original sister wives happen in Greek mythology. Isn't that a show, Sister Wives? I've watched something like that and thought, oh, I couldn't do that. So yes, Zeus's sister wife is named Hera. She's the goddess of fertility, marriage, and I think her symbol is the cow because they said she had cow eyes or something. Gosh, I feel like that would be my symbol too. And finally, the goddess Aphrodite is also known as Venus by the Romans. And you may have heard, Athena is also known by Minerva. Hera, why can't I remember her other name? I can't remember it. I'll try to. It's Juno. So if you know those names, you're probably knowing the goddesses that I'm talking about. Aphrodite is also known as Venus. Her son is Aeneas. That's her mortal son. Her immortal son is Cupid. So all these three goddesses want this apple. They're all very powerful too. So Zeus, he doesn't really want to pick the most fair. So he's like, oh, why don't you guys ask this Paris guy? because he knows like Paris is dumb enough to fall for it. P.S. I feel sorry for anyone named Paris because, Paris and Romeo and Juliet, he didn't really meet a very good end, you know? I don't want to spoil it, but he dies at the tomb. He also didn't get to marry the love of his life or whatever. So, you don't want to be named Paris. Another reason why you don't want to be named Paris is that he lives away from his parents because there's a prophecy that says he would bring about the ruin of his kingdom. And so his parents don't want anything to do with that. So they have him like grow up among shepherds. And then he ends up like going to live with this nymph, which sounds really great to a lot of you guys probably. So Zeus is too smart to pick who's the most beautiful. Take note, gentlemen, if any like goddess women ask you like, who's the most beautiful? Don't answer. Okay. This is the best way. Or like have some other guy answer because what is in store for you is not pretty. There's no beauty of this beauty contest. So Paris, all of a sudden, like he's with his nymph. Her name's Onini. They're living off away from this great city of Troy. And these three goddesses appear to him. And they're like, hey, which one of us is the most beautiful? Each one of us will offer you something great. There's a lot of archetypes here, like the golden apple, the beauty contest, the contest of shooters, the honorable oath, right? The son or daughter who is sent away because there's a prophecy, right? These archetypes are character situations, and it can be places and things that are seen across time and across culture. No matter what culture you live in, there's some character that's the coward. There's some characters that's the mother, the overbearing mother. There's some character that is the jealous wife, okay? Or jealous husband. So Paris ends up getting offered three great things. He gets offered victory by Athena, which is pretty cool. He is offered power by Hera. She offers him like, here's all this land. If you want to say that I'm the most beautiful, you can have all this land. This is similar to, I believe, like another story in the Bible where Jesus is tempted by, some devil-like creature, right? Oh, you can have this if you just, do this. So these are archetypes, okay? But Paris is offered the most beautiful woman in the world by Aphrodite. And Paris, being known as sort of a coward, ends up picking Aphrodite as the most beautiful of the goddesses. And because he picks her, Aphrodite offers the most beautiful woman in the world. But that happens to be Helen, who's married to Menelaus. Okay, so let me just go back so you're connecting here. So just remember that the myth says that there was a woman named Helen, so beautiful that all the men wanted to marry her, that they all made an oath that said they would protect whoever would marry Helen, and if someone would steal her away, they would all come to this Greek's aid. Now, why is Helen stolen away from her husband? Menelaus, however you want to say it, because this goon Paris chooses the most beautiful woman in the world from these goddesses that came down from Mount Olympus to where he lived. It's just clear as mud, and he ends up getting Helen as his prize. Okay, so Paris ends up going to visit Menelaus in Sparta. And as a house guest, he should behave properly and should not covet his neighbor's wife, okay? He should not steal from the household. And as hosts, Menelaus and Helen should offer him food and drink, and they should offer him a place to stay and be very gracious hosts. These are the expectations of the Greeks. This is an expectation of hospitality even now. Okay, if you have someone come to your house, a friend, you need to offer them food and drink. You need to offer them a place to stay. You need to be kind. Those are the rules. Okay, but as a guest, you're not supposed to overstay your welcome. You're not supposed to steal. Okay, are these things, like, no matter what culture you're from, these are expectations. This is an archetype. Okay, archetype is a situation seen across time and across culture. How many times have you seen in a Disney movie where a person dressed up as a beggar needs shelter from the bitter cold? Right, that happens. Like, if you think about it. Or like there's this diamond in the rough type figure. Okay, a beggar. Okay. So, also gods in disguise, that happens in a Disney movie. That's called an archetype. Okay. So Helen, she is this gracious hostess. She either runs away with Paris or she's stolen away. We're not really sure. It's not really clear in the myth what happens. Since her husband is older, maybe she did run away with Paris. We don't know. The nymph that Paris was living with, by the way, ends up killing herself because she's so sad that Paris left. Never kill yourself over a guy. That's crazy. But she ends up being stolen away, or she absconds to Troy, this other city. So there's Sparta, there's Ithaca, there's all these other Greek city-states. And then there's Troy. That's where Paris is from. However, Paris, remember, does not live with his family. He lives alone with this nymph because of the prophecy, okay? But he brings Helen back to Troy. So Menelaus is furious, and he calls upon all the people, the suitors that originally wanted to marry Helen. He says, we need to go fight for war. This is, sacrilegious or whatever. This is blasphemy that Paris has stolen my wife from me. And because there's this covenant, this promise between the suitors, they all must go off to war. Odysseus doesn't want to go to war. He's the character we're going to read about in the Odyssey, guys. So this is important to pay attention to this, okay? He is redheaded hero, by the way. We already mentioned this. He pretends to be crazy when the herald, that's the message bringer, brings the news that he has to go to war. He pretends to be crazy, and he starts plowing his field with, like, salt. He puts salt into the field. Apparently that's assault on the ground. Assault. See how I made a pun? And he ends up having to go to war anyways because the messenger is clever, and he ends up picking up Odysseus' little son who can barely crawl, puts him in front of the plow, and of course, Odysseus can't plow over his little son. He ends up having to go to war out of love. And he also made a promise, so it would be kind of cowardly if he didn't. Then he has to go get Achilles, who's another great fighter, okay? Achilles is such a great fighter, but here's another problem. There's a prophecy about Achilles. Achilles is a beast when it comes to fighting, but his mama knows that there's a prophecy that said that if he does fight in the Trojan War, he will die an untimely death. Kind of like Romeo and Juliet. This story begins similarly, okay? I want you to know. Okay, Achilles is dressed up by his mother. At this point, I don't know how old he is in the story, but his mom convinces him to dress up like a girl. That's an archetype, right? Have you guys ever seen Mrs. Doubtfire? Dressing as a girl has been around since the Greek times, since Romeo and Juliet's time. It's still happening, okay? But he dresses as a girl to avoid war. But Odysseus is clever. He ends up having to go get Achilles, and he outsmarts Achilles by having a bunch of, like, jewels and then having a bunch of swords. And Achilles, of course, like, goes towards the swords while the other girls goes toward the jewels. Okay, that's kind of sexist story, but that's how apparently the myth goes. So Odysseus ends up, like, talking Achilles into going to battle, and Achilles agrees because he's like, yeah, I want to go have glory, right? I want to fight. Okay. So you should know a little background about Achilles, which you probably already know this, but I have to tell you this anyways because there's someone that doesn't know. Achilles is a typical mama's boy. Like, she wants to protect him so badly that she like held him by his heel and dipped him into the Styx River. It was a difficult job, but she sticks with it. Sorry, there's another pun. Sad when you have to laugh at your own jokes. But it ends up making him almost immortal. I believe he's a demigod, but he can be harmed. That's the important thing. And he can be harmed on that heel. Why didn't she just dip him in the second time? Don't ask me, okay? I wasn't there. But, of course, we know that something will happen because that is his fate. This war ends up being fought every day for 10 years, you guys. All these 1,000 ships deploy from these Greek city-states to Troy, which is on a major trade route, and they're harboring Helen. Think of how selfish it is, too, that, like, Helen and Paris want to be together, and this is causing the whole city to have to fight, send their young men to go fight. This is, and as Odysseus, I'd be angry if I had to stay away from my wife and my child and my kingdom just because, you know, Helen can't keep it together with her husband, you know? It's just, fighting for honor is sometimes, I just question, was it even very smart to make that oath? I don't know. The 10-year war wages on. And you should know that everybody's pretty ticked off at each other during the war. Like, the Greeks start fighting amongst themselves because Agamemnon steals a girl from her father to keep in his tent. I know, this is spicy, folks. And he has to end up giving her back because it angers, like, the god Apollo. Also, Agamemnon felt like he had to slay his only virginal daughter to appease the goddess Artemis before this whole journey because the Greeks were not getting a favorable wind. That's another problem they had. Another problem ended up to be because Agamemnon had to give back his woman slave, he ends up taking Achilles' woman slave. Achilles stops wanting to fight because Achilles is angry over the theft of a woman because they're there fighting for the theft of a woman. Remember, Helen. Okay? So, all you need to understand is there's a bunch of hypocrisy wrapped up in this fighting for a woman when they can't even follow their own guidelines. Okay, do you understand why I'm calling them hypocrites? Okay, so Achilles is so frustrated, he refuses to fight. He says, I'm going to stay in my tent. Of course, I will offer you food and drink if you come in here. I'm going to be respectful to you, but I refuse to fight until Agamemnon gives my woman back. So they're fighting amongst themselves. Patroclus, Achilles' cousin / lover, we're not really sure which one it is. It's a person very close to Achilles that's male. Says to Achilles, like, I need to go fight. The Greeks are losing. Can I borrow your armor? And Achilles is like, absolutely not. Or he says, yes, we're not really sure. The myth isn't really clear. But Patroclus goes out and fights, and he's wearing Achilles' armor. The Greeks are so inspired by this that they believe it's really Achilles fighting, and they start to win the war. But then Patroclus is struck down, and they believe that Patroclus was Achilles, so they were very sad. But they find out it wasn't. Now, Achilles, when he finds out that his cousin or lover, we're not really sure, it could have been a cousin lover. I mean, Edgar Allan Poe married his 13-year-old cousin, okay? It was totally legal back then, whatever. Whatever, don't judge them. I don't judge your life. I'm not going to judge these Greek peoples. I'm going to try not to. But Achilles is so angry over the death of his cousin, he ends up getting this very special armor from the god Hephaestus. And Hephaestus is the blacksmithing god. His mom, by the way, gets him this armor. Typical helicopter mom. He ends up going out there to fight, and he ends up fighting Hector, who is Paris's brother. Now, let me just give you a reminder. Paris is the Trojan king's son. So is Hector. So Hector and Paris are brothers. Hector fights Achilles, but he's like, okay, before I fight you, this is stupid because honestly, like Paris and Menelaus should have fought, but it's like something happens where one of the gods envelops Paris into a cloud because he's weak, and they take him back to Troy. Okay, so it ends up being Achilles fighting Hector. Now, Hector says, I'll fight you, Achilles, because Achilles blames Hector for Patroclus' death. But Hector wants to die an honorable death. He already knows, like, he kissed his son and his wife goodbye, and he knows, like, this war is going to bring an end to him. He already knows that. He's very sad about it, but he wants to be buried properly because he's a courageous man, and courageous men, they should be buried properly. That's an archetype, right? We are buried properly. How do you want to be buried? That's a dark question, but I want to hear, like, in a puzzle here, like, tell me how you would want to be married if you were buried, God forbid. Me, I want to be buried by roller skates. No, I want my corpse to be fired, so I don't want any big deal. Scatter my ashes wherever, but I want someone special to me to have my roller skates. Okay, so I want you guys to put yours in the ed puzzle here. Tell me, what are your expectations when you go? Okay, but Hector, he wants to be, respectfully buried. He wants his body to be anointed with oils, and he wants his body to be fired. They basically would put it on this giant fortification they would create, and they would set it on fire. They would put coins on your eyes. That was the respectful way. Or, if your body couldn't be found back then, they would, take your roller skates, or they would take your oar that you what's the word? That you wielded in your life, and they would put it up like a monument with a bunch of your other items, and that was respectful death. Well, come to find that Achilles refuses to make any covenants between himself and Hector. He says, I will not make any covenants between you. There will not be any covenants between me and you, dog. So those are Achilles' last words to Hector. He fights Hector, he kills Hector, and he drags Hector's body around the city of Troy and mangles it. He drags it several times on his chariot. Okay, that is not how you treat a dead body. That is not how you do it. And it angers the gods. And of course, the prophecy comes true. Like, he's going to bring about his own ruin in the Trojan War because he was angry. P.S. Anger covers up a lot of other emotions like sadness and grief. Unfortunately, especially men, it seems that men in our society too are discouraged to show other emotions besides anger. And so it's kind of like that iceberg emotion. I'm going to insert a question here about when you actually, have you ever felt angry and displayed anger, but then later on regretted it because you felt something else? Like you were actually upset or disgusted or embarrassed, or you felt shame. You're disappointed. I'm going to put that question below. So far there's 3 questions, I think, in this ed puzzle. But it ends up happening that the gods are angry about that. Paris ends up killing Achilles. He gets helped by some of the gods, of course. And then Odysseus, finally I'm getting to Odysseus. Odysseus, in a dream, he sent this dream from Athena that he can build this giant horse, hide his greatest fighters in this horse. I'm trying to hurry because this video is almost 30 minutes. And he can hide the rest of his army in their ships a little bit away from this Trojan beach, okay? So one morning, the Trojans opened the gate to only find one man named Sinon, I think is his name, or Simon, and this giant wooden horse. This is where the whole myth of the Trojan horse, be careful accepting free gifts because they may not be that good. You ever accepted something free and it turned out to not be that good of a deal? Yes. The Trojans open the gate one day. They find a man named Sinon or whatever. And Sinon says, oh no, they left me here. I was a traitor. He says, the Greeks left. They all went back home. They were tired of fighting. This is 10 years of fighting. And they left Lord Poseidon this great horse so that they would have a peaceful voyage home. But please don't take it into the city. It's actually like they built this, and they send you their regards. They said the war is over. You can keep Helen. So the Trojans, of course, see this giant horse and they're like, seems legit. Let's drag this inside our city gates. And they do, and they celebrate. Well, in the middle of the night, this is probably blasphemous, but the Greek soldiers spring out of the giant horse. They unlock the gates. The Greek soldiers in the ships have all come back. And Odysseus had, more than 720 ships. So I imagine Menelaus had many ships, many hundreds of ships. Agamemnon had many hundreds of ships. Nestor had many hundreds of ships. So there was a big Greek fleet, a flotilla or whatever word you want to use. But these Greeks came back to fight. And since they were granted access to the city, they ended up sacking Troy and burning it and enslaving the women. And then they killed some of the children. It's awful. They threw them from the wall. I can't even imagine watching that happen and then being enslaved as a woman. Okay. So all these things happen, and then we finally get to the point where Odysseus is trying to get home. Well, guess what? He's already been fighting a war for 10 years. And then he's been, for the Odyssey, that's his voyage home. It takes him another 10 years to get home. So that's where we're going to start in our adventures when we start reading the Odyssey. Thank you for watching this video so far. He does get washed up on shore. P.S. He is redheaded. He does wash up on shore pretty much naked and without a crew at the end of that 20 years. And this is a great story, so I hope you start to enjoy it. I don't know. You probably were bored by this part, but it'll go a little faster once we get started and we have text to read from.